I mean, I'm essentially a historian of British imperial policy in the 20th century and end of empire. And a few years ago, I got interested in the monarchy's role in this process of decolonization. And that resulted in a book which came out 10 years ago called Monarchy and the End of Empire. And while that was sort of brewing, while that was germinating, in 2009, I became director of the Institute of Commonwealth Studies at the University of London. And of course, I'd worked on imperial history, but I didn't have much sense of how the Commonwealth operated now. I wasn't really very conscious of it. So I started to think, well, what are its big achievements? What can I kind of, when I'm going to funders, what can I say? The Commonwealth is so important because it's done this or this. And the more I tried to find out, the less clear it became. And that wasn't for lack of access. One of the things you really did have was access, because the Institute was an accredited Commonwealth organisation. So, you know, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Perth in Australia in 2011, I went out there, and you get a little pass, you know, and you can go and you can talk to people, you can talk to prime ministers, foreign ministers. It's great. I wasn't really used to it as a sort of, you know, humble historian. But the question just sort of kept on recurring. And that meeting in 2011 was a failure. I mean, it botched a big attempt at reforming the organisation through something called the Commonwealth Eminent Persons Group report. And it failed really because the organisation was terrified of offending any of its members. And so I sort of thought, why if I travelled halfway across the world to come to this, you know? And it started I wrote a very kind of angry article which got published, but no one seemed to notice it within the sort of Commonwealth circles, because I don't think were used to criticism at all. And then 2 years after that, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting was held in Sri Lanka under President Rajapaksa. And this was a major scandal. I mean, Rajapaksa had the most appalling human rights record through actions of state forces during the Sri Lankan Civil War. And he was using it really as a sort of form of reputation laundering, to wrap himself in Commonwealth values of human rights and democracy and all good things and the rule of law. And one could say that the same thing happened last year when the heads of government meeting met in Rwanda. Paul Kagame, not a kind of a great upholder of human rights. But again, it enables the British government, to Boris Johnson, to say, Rwanda is a safe place to send refugees, because after all, they hosted the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. And it kind of started to dawn on me that the Commonwealth represented a number of the things that I find most objectionable in politics. It's cliquey. I mean, it claims to represent 2.5 billion people. So why was it that the same 30 people only ever turned up to our events, that were versed in all the kind of rituals and the language of the Commonwealth? Secondly, it's obsessed by process rather than results. It loves meetings for the sake of meetings. It's almost a device designed to last forever, but at the downside is that it's not designed to do anything. And the two kind of go hand in hand. It will last because it doesn't challenge anyone or threaten anyone. For heaven's sake, Samoa, which is hosting the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting next year, is rebuilding its airport, modernizing its airport, so 3,000 delegates can fly over to talk about climate change. And it's that kind of obsession with carrying on the rituals, the meetings, but not really being able to do anything about it. It is tremendously deferential, not just to the royal family, but to power in general, which is why it's almost incapable of doing anything that might threaten any of its member states, and therefore is largely impotent. It is platitudinous. If you read ministerial speeches, it's always the same elements. Never about targets, never about achievements. And moreover, and this is, I now speak as the director of something called History and Policy, it is afraid of its own history. And I don't just mean imperial history. I mean that long history of kind of declining relevance from the 1950s to the current day. If it could do, it would abolish history altogether. Every year would be year zero, when the huge potential, the huge untapped potential of the Commonwealth would finally be realized, without having to notice that for the last 30 years, it has really done nothing of note. So what about monarchy? As I said, my book, Monarchy and the End of Empire, came out in 2013. And the final chapters kind of wrote themselves, because I could sort of suddenly see how monarchy worked within a Commonwealth context. And if there's a kind of if there's a message, if there's a sort of an overall theme to the book, it's this: that whereas the 1960s and 70s, when the Commonwealth had a bit of momentum, it had a bit of bite. It was fighting a battle against apartheid and white supremacy in Southern Africa. Monarchy was a bit of an embarrassment. Didn't quite know what to do with it. As, in a way, the issue of South Africa is resolved, at least temporarily in the 90s, apartheid ends, and the Commonwealth loses its signature issue, suddenly the monarchy becomes much more important to the Commonwealth, to the point that now it's almost the only thing, so far as the media is concerned, it's the only reason a Commonwealth story is newsworthy for the media. Because in a way, the monarchy has become a kind of life support system for the Commonwealth. And that was kind of, the book came out at a time when, as I say, the scandal of the Commonwealth meeting in Sri Lanka in 2013 was happening. And I wrote quite another sort of angry piece, which got taken up by Valentine Lowe in the Times. And there was you always kind of, it's always dangerous to come out with a little aphorism, because kind of people notice that in the way that they don't notice kind of more reasoned arguments. You'll be aware of that. And I sort of summed up the book, and I said this. A former New Zealand Prime Minister once said that the Queen was the bit of glue that held the Commonwealth together. Increasingly, the Commonwealth resembles a dead parrot, which relies on that glue to stand upright on its perch. From that point of view, I was the devil, so far as the sort of Commonwealth true believers were concerned, and I never really recovered from that. And then, actually, the Monarchy and the End of Empire was a fairly sort of conventional academic book. This book, Empire's New Clothes, was written very, very quickly between really the Brexit referendum in 2016 and 2017, and it all just came kind of flowing out, all that sort of pent-up frustration. And why does the monarchy matter in that context? Firstly, I think, the life support system, from a British point of view, has preserved a myth which played its part in the Brexit referendum. The myth that the Commonwealth is something solid. It is almost an alternative to the EU. It could be an alternative to the EU. And it isn't. The EU is something, whether you like it or not, that is of substance, that affected every element of our daily lives. the Commonwealth is a mirage. But the Queen, in a sense, kept the idea going that the Commonwealth was a great universal good above politics in the way that she never did for Europe, for our European identity. And I think that was profoundly damaging. I think what has evolved, secondly, what has evolved is a system which is profoundly confusing, which no one understands. The Commonwealth realms against the Commonwealth itself. Most journalists don't understand that when Barbados became a republic in 2021, all their front pages were Barbados leaves the Commonwealth. It doesn't leave the Commonwealth. It's not the same thing. But the problem is, in international relations, it matters what people believe and what people think. And a system which is poorly understood can be profoundly damaging. And I think that that's one of the reasons that civil servants in the 1960s and 70s, if they could have waved a magic wand, would probably have ordained that all of the remaining realms, including Australia and Canada and the Caribbean, became republics overnight. Because frankly, it makes diplomacy easier. Everyone knows where they are in that situation. And there was a sort of latent republicanism there, which is worth thinking about. A sense that republicanism was on the rise across the world, and probably in the UK as well. That moment may have passed, but it can return. The headship of the Commonwealth, which Charles now is, provides the monarch with a degree of latitude which really doesn't fit well within the kind of theory of constitutional monarchy. When the Queen gave her Christmas Day broadcast, Commonwealth Day broadcast, she doesn't consult with the prime ministers of any of her realms. And that's not how we believe constitutional monarchy actually works. And it was okay in her hands. Maybe it's more risky in the hands of someone like Charles, who has not been afraid of pushing his pet causes. And soft power, finally. You saw that we started with that picture of the Jeep. We referred to soft power earlier on. The idea that the monarchy abroad are about soft power. Well, Kate and William's rather disastrous tour of the Caribbean last year suggested that that's not the case anymore. So in a way, a republic, an elected head of the UK, would simplify a huge amount of stuff. It would finally dissolve the myth of the Commonwealth, which I think has been dangerous, particularly for the UK itself, in leading to a misunderstanding of our place in the world in the 21st century. So much to gain from you and Graham and everyone achieving that referendum on a republic and winning it. Thank you very much.